Chapter 145. After a few more rounds, there was a noise outside. Great elder princesses maid came in to report. Master, His Majesty and several masters in the palace have arrived. Emperor Lu Qingdi's arrival naturally put the game on hold, and everyone went out to greet him. Jingwan stood up and paused for a moment, feeling a little dizzy. Ruan Fangfei walked past her and clearly saw her exceptionally bright and beautiful smile. Jingwan subconsciously touched the scratch on the back of her hand. She lowered her head and looked at it. It seemed to be no different from a small scratch. At this moment, the surface had already formed a scab. She gently rubbed it, and the obvious scab fell off. There was no more bleeding. Young lady, Nanny Gong saw that Jingwan was still standing at the same spot after everyone else had left. She walked forward and saw Jingwan staring at the scratch on her hand. Thinking that something had happened, she hurriedly pulled her hand over to take a closer look. Worried, she took her pulse but did not find anything wrong. However, she knew that her young lady was not the type to make a fuss out of nothing. In the past, when she was tending to the flowers and plants, she would occasionally scratch her hand. She was completely unconcerned. "Miss, what's wrong?" Jingwan frowned and said, "Nanny, ask someone to find my grandmother and tell her that I suddenly feel a little uncomfortable. I don't want to be impolite in front of His Majesty, so I won't go to greet him." Jingwan was not being paranoid. The main reason was that the situation was special now. She obviously felt that Ruan Fangfei was not kind to her. At this time, it was better to be careful. If something really happened when she was greeting His Majesty, she might get into trouble and the Luo family might be implicated. The loss outweighed the gain. Moreover, Jingwan didn't think that her dizziness was an illusion. She had always been healthy. She didn't suffer from anemia or hypoglycemia. She also had plenty of sleep. How could she feel dizzy for no reason? She didn't encounter anything stimulating, so naturally, she wouldn't have an illusion. Nanny Gong looked more serious and said, "Miss, let me help you go back." Jingwan looked fine and felt that she was in a good state. It was better to play a complete show. So she said, "Nanny, do you have any way to make me look weak?" Granny Gong thought for a moment. "Then, miss, please bear with it." Jingwan felt a sudden burst of pain in several places on her body. Without special training, the average person's ability to endure pain was not very strong. Perhaps Jingwan's will was slightly stronger than the average person's, so her ability to endure pain was better. But now it was not very good, and she almost cried out. However, the pain left as quickly as it came. She felt weak in her body, and her legs gave way. If Granny Gong hadn't caught her, she would have fallen to the ground. "Miss, let me carry you back." Jingwan nodded weakly. "Nanny, where did you learn this method? It's too cruel." Jingwan couldn't see her own face at this moment. She would probably say amazing. Her healthy and rosy cheeks were now completely pale. Coupled with her weak appearance, no one would suspect that she was faking it. Nanny Gong carried Jingwan in her arms. When the servant girl outside saw Jingwan's appearance, she was really frightened. "Nanny, what's wrong with Miss?" "I'll tell you later. Qingzhu, go find old madam. Miss is not very well, so don't say anything unnecessary." "Yes." Nanny Gong carried Jingwan and Bai Shao back to the shed of the Luo family. The shed naturally had an inner room for rest. Nanny Gong put Jingwan on the bed and put a pillow on her. "Miss, it may last for 2 hours. It may not be very good. Bear with it for the time being." It was indeed not good to feel weak all over. "It's okay." She closed her eyes to rest. Because she always had a good rest schedule, she couldn't fall asleep at this moment. Ruan Fangfei found that Jingwan didn't follow them out. She narrowed her eyes slightly and wondered what was going on. Could it be that she had found some clues? No, it shouldn't be. It was just a small scratch. How could there be such a careful person in the world? Even the emperor, who let people test the poison first before eating anything, wouldn't be so careful. If there was really someone who could do this, then he wouldn't have to come into contact with anyone and wouldn't be able to live a good life. Perhaps the effect of the drug took effect in advance. But even so, what could be done? Ruan Fangfei smiled carelessly. After receiving Qing Zhu's message, old Madame Luo was also worried, but she couldn't leave at this time. Lu Qingdi was escorted by the imperial guards on both sides. The leader was not the commander of the imperial guards, but many princes. Regardless of whether they were crowned as kings or not, all of them were above the age of 10. The one in the second carriage was the Empress, followed by noble consort Su and consort Qin Shufei. Behind them were the favored concubines, and behind them were the princesses. For such a festive day, it was naturally impossible for all the concubines in the imperial harem to come out. At this time, it depended on their status and how favored they were. If they were not favored and had no status, then they could only continue to rot in the palace. Everyone knelt down and shouted, "Long live," 3 times. Only one person stood at the top, enjoying everyone's submission. It was no wonder that so many people wanted to sit in that position. The taste of power was really addictive. Lu Qingdi said, "You may rise." He didn't say anything else. After Lu Qingdi and the imperial concubines were properly settled, the others dispersed. Old Madame Luo let Wang Shi stay for the time being and hurriedly went back. How could she feel uncomfortable without any reason? Out of concern for her son, Su Gue Fei wanted to call Jinxin Wang's prospective Wang Fei and prospective Su Fei over to continue the conversation. Originally, after Su Gue Fei knew that Wan Fong Fei's fate was not suitable to be the imperial family's wife, she felt a bit of disgust towards her. However, her status was there. For the sake of the Grand Secretary's face, she shouldn't favor one and discriminate against the other. However, it was obvious that only Wan Fong Fei appeared in front of her. After learning the situation, noble consort Su's heart skipped a beat. She was really scared by Li Hongyuan's misfortune. Now, it was just an imperial edict to grant marriage. They hadn't officially engaged yet. If something happened, it would be terrible. Her son might really be a bachelor for the rest of his life. Noble consort Su couldn't sit still and hurriedly sent someone to call Lu Qingdi. Great elder princess also couldn't help frowning. One of her was at my place before. Why did she feel uncomfortable after just turning around? She didn't wait for Lu Qingdi and directly left. Obviously, she wanted to see Jingwan in person. On Lu Qingdi's side, the conversation with the officials hadn't officially started yet, but he came quickly. Noble consort Su just talked about Jingwan's situation, and Lu Qingdi's reaction was almost the same as hers. He turned around and ordered the imperial physician to go to the shed of the Luo family. He originally thought that the former one's situation should be better after she got married. If this one suddenly had an accident, then Lu Qingdi probably wouldn't dare to grant another marriage, so as not to harm other girls. "Your Majesty, I want to see her in person. Please allow me," noble consort Su said. They were also outside the palace. "Go ahead." Noble consort Su put her hand on an aunt's arm. She still looked dignified and graceful, but she couldn't help walking faster. Halfway through, she seemed to think of something. "Go," when asked someone to call Yuan or here. Wan Fong Fei, who followed behind her, subconsciously clenched her fists, but in a flash, she loosened them. Wasn't it better to have more people? It was more interesting to let them all have a good look, wasn't it? Wan Fong Fei calculated the time in her heart. The imperial tent was not far from the shed of the Luo family. Prince Jean and the imperial physician walked faster than them, so there wasn't much difference. Even if Prince Jean arrived a little later, it didn't matter. Jingwan was not only weak because of Mammy Gong's attack, but also dizzy. If she still couldn't figure out that she had been set up, she would have lived in vain. Mammy Gong's face was very gloomy. Madame Luo was very worried, and so was Great Elder Princess. However, the doctor of the Luo family had already felt Jingwan's pulse in both hands, but he couldn't find a reason. "Madam, I'm incompetent. I can't diagnose the cause of third Mrs. illness." "Shut up." Great Elder Princess was so angry that she wanted to scold him, but she realized that he was a servant of the Luo family. She had to consider the master's face before beating the dog, so she said, "Call the imperial physician." Knowing that she had been set up, it was not a wise choice to call the imperial physician, but obviously, she couldn't refuse in this situation. Noble consort Su is here, so, except for Jingwan, who couldn't get up, and Great Elder Princess, everyone in the room got up and bowed. "Madam, please don't be so polite. How is your third miss?" Noble consort Su asked worriedly. Your Highness, I haven't found the cause of her illness yet. I'm going to ask the imperial physician to take a look. Madame Luo was very anxious at this moment. Madam, don't worry. The imperial physician has been invited and will be here soon. I like to see that girl. But then she saw Great Elder Princess. After a pause, they greeted each other. Great Elder Princess was not interested in the people in her brother's harem, including the Empress's sister-in-law. Each of them looked dignified and virtuous, but in fact, none of them were easy to deal with. Therefore, it was good enough to make her nod when they met. When noble consort Su saw Jingwan's expression, she was also shocked. It was as if she was a completely different person from before. However, Ruan Fangfei, who was standing a little farther away, had a trace of inquiry in her eyes. Her illness was far from fatal. At most, it would make her feel inexplicably dizzy, and then she would need to call the imperial physician. Ruan Fangfei gently rubbed the purse on her waist. Jingwan smelled the mixed fragrance in the air. Although it was very faint, it suddenly made her feel sick. Miss. Nanny Gong hurriedly supported Jingwan and patted her back. Wan, Madame Luo also hurried forward. In fact, Jingwan didn't vomit anything, but noble consort Su still stepped back and subconsciously covered her mouth and nose with a handkerchief. But then she realized that it was not appropriate and put down her hand as if nothing had happened. Fortunately, there was no smell. Great Elder Princess glanced at her and coldly raised the corner of her mouth, pretending to be sick. Jingwan wanted to vomit again. She reluctantly raised her weak hand and tried to push Nanny Gong away. Nanny Gong didn't mind and held Jingwan's wrist. However, her heart almost jumped out when she touched Jingwan's wrist. Fortunately, she had practiced the skill of keeping calm and collected for many years. She moved her hand quietly and pressed her fingertips on Jingwan's pulse. There was no mistake. It was indeed a smooth pulse. She had felt Jingwan's pulse several times, and the imperial physician had also felt her pulse, but there was no sign of slippery pulse. The girl vomited suddenly after noble consort Su came in. To be exact, it should be after Ruan Fangfei came in. Nanny Gong glanced at Ruan Fangfei secretly and happened to see her take her hand away from the purse on her waist. If she hadn't found it by accident, the imperial physician would have been the next one to feel the girl's pulse. Prince Jin's future wife was pregnant. This was not as simple as being forcibly defiled. It should be known that this marriage was proposed by the Luo family. The furious Emperor Lu Qingdi would only think that the Luo family wanted his son to be a cheap father. How dare they plot against his son and the imperial family? He wouldn't think about the unreasonable things in it rationally. Maybe he would immediately execute the girl. Not only would she die in vain, but she would also bear a bad reputation. The Luo family, who deceived the emperor, would also be wiped out. What a sinister and vicious idea. It turned out that the real killing move was waiting here. Nanny Gong suppressed the fear in her heart. Fortunately, she found it first, and fortunately, the girl was protected by the prince. Even if she didn't find it and the girl was diagnosed with a slippery pulse, the prince would try his best to clear the girl's name. One thing that Ruan Fangfei didn't expect at all was that Li Hanyuan cared about Jingwan. He was her biggest backer. Prince Jin has arrived. As soon as the voice fell, Li Hanyuan personally lifted the curtain and came in. His eyes were gloomy and the hostility on his body seemed to be substantial. His old man had already decreed the marriage, so he naturally had fewer scruples. He directly walked to the side of the bed and saw that Jingwan's complexion was very poor. Her eyes were closed, and she looked like she was on the verge of death. At this moment, he really wanted to tear Ruan Fangfei into pieces. When noble consort Su sent someone to call him, he actually already knew about this matter and rushed over first. How is it? Nanny Gong's back was facing the others, but Li Hanyuan could see very clearly. Nanny Gong pressed on the inside of Jingwan's arm under her armpit, and then took Jingwan's pulse without leaving a trace. He breathed a sigh of relief and supported Jingwan to lie back down. Your Highness, the cause of the illness hasn't been diagnosed yet. How could Li Hanyuan not know that Nanny Gong changed Wanwan's pulse? If it was just a normal pulse, Even if she was seriously ill, there was no need to do this. His face was terribly gloomy, and his eyes shot like arrows to the two imperial physicians who came in behind him. "Get over here." The two imperial physicians couldn't help trembling and hurried forward. Noble consort Su raised her eyebrows at Li Hongyuan's attitude. Although her son's temper had always been bad, and it was normal for him to be impatient and unhappy when he was inexplicably called over, he clearly cared about third Miss Luo. Although this care might not be very obvious, it was already very surprising. However, Ruan Fangfei's feeling was completely different. This was the man she had cared about for so many years. He might not be so sharp in other aspects, but he absolutely couldn't deceive her when it came to feelings. Last time when she was with Great Elder Princess, she vaguely felt that he seemed to be different about Luo Jingwan. It turned out that it wasn't her illusion. How could he care about others? He, Li Hongyuan, could only care about her Ruan Fangfei. The devil in Ruan Fangfei's heart almost broke out her body and rushed up to tear that eyesore into pieces. Wait until your future princess is diagnosed with a slippery pulse. Let's see if you will still care about her so much. As if feeling Ruan Fangfei's gaze, Li Hongyuan glanced at her with no warmth in his eyes. Even Ruan Fangfei couldn't help but tremble in her heart. He wanted to kill her. He actually wanted to kill her. She always thought that she was special in his heart, but it turned out that she was not at all. Li Hongyuan took a glance at it, so no one except Ruan Fangfei felt his killing intent. The imperial physician carefully felt Jingwan's pulse and was puzzled. Judging from her pulse, it should be the evil spirit in her body, but it seemed to be a little too dangerous. Why couldn't he find the cause of the disease? Not daring to be sure, he checked the other hand and looked at Jingwan's complexion. However, because of Jingwan's special identity, he didn't dare to look carefully and asked Nurse Gong some questions. After checking the pulse, he signaled his old rival to check the pulse. During this process, no one spoke and waited for the second person to finish checking. "Tell me the truth." The two imperial physicians looked at each other and deliberated for a moment. "Your Highness, from the pulse, it should be the evil spirit in her body. Like what this nurse said, third Miss Luo has always been healthy, so she didn't notice it. It's just that she suddenly came to the water and the humidity is heavy, so it might be triggered. Moreover, it seems to be a little dangerous. In addition, it might have cooled her stomach." Impossible, Ruan Fangfei screamed in her heart. Nonsense, nonsense. It was obviously a slippery pulse. Her face was a little distorted, but fortunately, she restrained herself and didn't directly shout out. Ruan Fangfei turned and left. She didn't want to stay any longer. If she stayed any longer, she was afraid that she would lose control and do something irrational. Li Hongyuan looked at them for a moment, and the two of them broke out in cold sweat. Prescribe medicine. As if they had been granted amnesty, the two of them discussed and prescribed a more conservative prescription. Madame Luo didn't know the truth of the matter, so she hurriedly sent someone to the nearby pharmacy to get the medicine. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan, and then his eyes fell on noble consort Su and great elder princess sitting opposite him. "Imperial aunt, please leave with my mother first. I'll sit for a while." Since Jingwan didn't seem to be in danger, great elder princess also left quickly. She just told her that after Jingwan got better, she would pass a message to her. Noble consort Su hesitated for a moment and also left. In the end, Li Hongyuan and Madame Luo looked at each other. Madame Luo knew Li Hongyuan's feelings for Jingwan. Although it was against the rules to be alone in a room, they were engaged after all, so they were not as strict as ordinary men and women. Besides, Prince Jean was a man, so even if others knew about it, they wouldn't dare to say anything. Therefore, except for Nanny Gong, all the servants were called away. After a while, Jingwan was also a little tired. Although she didn't fall asleep, she was a little dizzy. Li Hongyuan looked at her quietly and felt distressed. This time he was wrong. He should have killed Ruan Fangfei earlier. Wan, this is the last time. In the future, if anyone dares to touch you, I will kill his or her whole family. Perhaps because Li Hongyuan's gaze was too strong, Jingwan slowly opened her eyes. In an instant, their eyes met, and the gentleness in Li Hongyuan's eyes was even stronger. Coupled with such a dirty face, Jingwan couldn't stop her heart from beating faster, and she suddenly closed her eyes again. Chapter 146. Li Hanyuan saw that Jingwan seemed to be ready to play dead to the end, so he didn't say anything. He reached out and touched Jingwan's face. Have a good rest. I'll leave first. I'll deal with the other things. Because of Li Hongyuan's sudden touch, Jingwan felt a little scared. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't have much strength, she probably would have slapped him. However, what did he'll deal with the other things mean? Could it be that he knew something about her being schemed against this time? Jingwan still didn't know the effect of what Ruan Fangfei used on her, and she didn't have the energy to think about how to repay Ruan Fangfei for the time being. However, she didn't intend to suffer in silence. In the past, she wanted to avoid her. Obviously, some people wouldn't cooperate with you just because you wanted them to. Before Li Hanyuan left, he raised his head and looked at Nanny Gong. Nanny Gong mouthed 2 words to him, slippery pulse. He had already thought of this possibility, but he didn't think of the exact answer just now. Very good, 3 times more guilty. Take good care of her. Li Hanyuan got up and left. Nanny Gong knew that this former master was not only reminding her, but also warning her. Li Hanyuan didn't need to say anything about today's matter. She also blamed herself for not taking enough precautions. However, who would have thought that Ruan Fangfei would do it personally and in public? Her thoughts were so clever that it was impossible to guard against. If she wasn't arrogant and conceited, she would have deliberately revealed some clues in front of Jingwan, and Jingwan was so careful that she caught this point and was on guard against her. Perhaps Jingwan would have fallen completely today. If it were someone else, they would only lose their reputation, and it would be difficult to clear their name even if they died. The most tragic thing was that in the end, it was very likely that they wouldn't know how they were schemed against and who schemed against them. More importantly, her reputation was so good that probably no one would suspect her. This was also extremely terrifying. Just as Li Hanyuan left, the Luo family's doctor came to visit again. It was very simple. He wanted to take Jingwan's pulse again. He didn't believe that he couldn't detect a cold. Earlier, because there were too many nobles around, he managed to hold himself back from acting out. Sir, it's not your fault that the girl's pulse is not correct. The physician was stunned when he heard this. He stroked his beard and frowned slightly. Miss, it's just nice now. Why don't you come back later? I'll still have to rely on you after we return to the residence. Changing the pulse wouldn't take a long time. The young lady's current pulse should be showing signs of a slippery pulse. Naturally, he couldn't let the manor doctor diagnose it. However, this slippery pulse wouldn't last for too long. It was just a scratch on the skin. As for how much medicine could be administered, it still needed to be stimulated by other things. If it persisted for too long, wouldn't it go against the heavens? Everything was about balance. Therefore, the duration of maintaining the pulse would definitely be short and not long. The manor doctor wasn't a fool. He immediately thought that there might be something fishy going on. And these things they often couldn't be let know. If they knew too much, they might lose their little life. So, Laofu will leave now. If Third Miss needs anything, just summon Laofu. Gong Mama nodded in agreement and sent the manor doctor out. Mama, what's the use of the things used on my body? Jingwan opened her eyes and asked. Gong Mama didn't hide anything and told Jingwan the facts and her own conjectures in detail. After listening, Jingwan was silent for a moment. Mama, you say she's just a teenage girl. How could her mind be so vicious to this degree? If we were to talk about the intersection between me and her, it would probably be Jean Xin Wang. But when she set her eyes on me, it was clearly before this marriage. However, I feel that this time's scheme against me should be related to Jean Xin Wang. Otherwise, there's no reason for her to be so ruthless. Was it purely because she felt that I had snatched her Wang Fei position, or was it because she actually admired Jean Xin Wang? Although Jean Xin Wang's reputation isn't good, Jingwan's voice lowered a bit, as if she was whispering. For some women, if the man isn't bad, they won't love him. If it's really like this, do I have reason to suspect that the accident that happened to sister-in-law in Great Princess Royal's residence and the attempted murderer was silenced by her? If the inference is correct, Then Jin Xinwang's former fiancé. Even if not all of them fell into her hands, there should be at least some of them. Hearing Jingwan's words, Gong Mama couldn't help but feel a chill all over her body. Even if Wang Yi schemed against the deceased young lady's former fiancé, he didn't kill or cripple him and ruin his reputation. How could this be described as vicious? But how did her Yuan family raise such a young lady? Originally, after asking for this marriage, I still felt a bit guilty towards her. I only wanted to borrow Jin Xinwang's name to give grandfather more time to gain a foothold in order to stabilize the Luo family and at the same time to solve my own predicament. I only wanted a status and didn't ask for anything else. I didn't want to compete with her. But now, Jingwan slightly lowered her eyes. I won't rest until I die. Gong Mama sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to pat Jingwan's arm. Young lady, don't think so much now. These things can be discussed later. That living king of hell had made his move. How could he give young lady the chance to personally take revenge? So, don't think about these things. Thinking about it is purely in vain. So, why waste your energy? Jingwan smiled. If you don't think about other things to distract yourself, you will only feel more uncomfortable. It's all this servant's fault. How can we blame Mama? We don't know what kind of means she has. This is the safest way. The whispers of the master and servant gradually disappeared. Not long after, Luo Laoforan personally came to deliver the medicine to Jingwan. Jingwan wasn't really sick. As the saying goes, medicine is 3 parts poison. Naturally, she wouldn't drink it. This matter could be hidden from anyone but Luo Laoforan. Thus, she pointed out everyone else. Gong Mama softly explained the whole story to Luo Laoforan, and Luo Laoforan was unable to restrain her anger. Grandmother, don't be angry. It's not worth it to harm your body from anger. Luo Laoforan's heart also felt a burst of fear. Fortunately, it was discovered. Otherwise, Jingwan leaned towards Luo Laoforan. She did it once, so don't blame us for doing it 15 times. Luo Laoforan lightly patted her. Don't worry about this matter. Don't dirty your hands. Ruan Rue taught such a daughter. He definitely isn't a good person. His daughter pretends to be gentle and flawless. He is most likely a sanctimonious hypocrite. The so-called father's debt is paid by the son. Naturally, the daughter's debt will also be paid by the father. Jingwan obediently shut her mouth and didn't say anything else. Grandmother probably wouldn't care even if she said anything. The Grand Secretary should be wronged. After all, he was an official in the imperial court. With so many old foxes gathered together, how could he not be discovered by anyone? Absolutely impossible. However, she silently lit a candle for him for giving birth to such an evil person. Gong Mama had already taken care of the medicine. Previously, with Luo Laoforan's obstruction and the presence of nobles, the Luo family didn't come to Jingwan's place, including Jingwan's mother, Madame Zhang. Later, because of Li Honyuan, Luo Laoforan directly cleared the place. When Li Honyuan left, she directly left someone to guard the door and forbade anyone from disturbing them until Luo Laoforan arrived. Jingwan was quite helpless about her grandmother's dislike of her second daughter-in-law, and even her second son. However, it was mainly because of her, so she was in no position to speak. At this moment, the husband and wife had been wandering outside. Madame Zhang occasionally peeked in through the gap in the curtain. She looked quite pitiful. Jingwan didn't know that Sun Yijia and Luo Jingbo were also outside. Grandmother, let them in. Let them wait outside. We'll talk about it after you've calmed down. All right, Jingwan couldn't win against her grandmother now. It was better to wait for 2 hours to pass. However, because of Jingwan's unexpected situation, the older brothers were fine, but the younger brothers and sisters weren't in the mood to play. Even if they couldn't sit still, they would be suppressed by their mothers. At this moment, Luo Laoforan was also in a bad mood. When she saw the others having fun, wouldn't she be asking for trouble? It was also because of this that she probably felt a little unhappy. Because Luo Laoforan favored Jingwan. Other than Luo Jingying, no one in the Luo family was envious of Jingwan. No, it was just that they didn't have a mother who instilled bad thoughts. Those ugly thoughts weren't so deep. Moreover, Those who were older than Jingwan more or less knew that when Jingwan was young, the things that she did to her grandmother were something that they couldn't do. Based on this, it was understandable that their grandmother favored their third sister. Therefore, they were relatively calm, especially the first branch. Jingwan saved Luo Jingda's first child. After that, the husband and wife were grateful to Jingwan, and so was Wang. Therefore, the children of the first branch were stricter. They didn't make trouble for Jingwan before, and they wouldn't in the future. The people of the fourth branch were closer to Jingwan. The three children of the second branch were more respectful to Jingwan. As for the remaining three branches, 3 of them were under 3 years old. The eldest son was taught by Luo Peishan, and the eldest daughter had been suppressed. Now that she was married, the legitimate son was still young, and Lu didn't let him disturb the harem. Therefore, among the grandchildren of the Luo family, the only one who really couldn't get along with Jingwan was Luo Jingying, so naturally, he became miserable. Madame Luo came out of the inner room and saw a group of listless grandchildren in the shed outside. When she learned that Jingwan was fine, the worry in her heart disappeared, and so did her irritation. Go and play. The younger ones couldn't hide their thoughts, so they naturally showed it on their faces. However, they still tried to endure it. Grandmother, is third sister okay? Luo Qi, the legitimate daughter of the fourth branch, asked carefully. Madame Luo smiled. Your third sister is fine. She is healthy. Although the illness came suddenly, as long as she takes medicine and has a rest, she will recover very quickly. Oh, then I am relieved. Then we will go and play. We will bring back delicious food and fun things for third sister. Our Qi girl is so considerate. Your third sister's love for you is not in vain. Luo Qi smiled, and then took the sixth daughter of the first branch and ran away. The others also left in 2s and 3s. Today's dragon boat race was only the biggest event. There are many small games, big and small, to be played together. Jingwan couldn't sleep, but Madame Luo still asked Sun Yijia to go in and chat with her. Listening to Sun Yijia talking about some of the more popular games today, Jingwan felt very sad. Now she was weak and couldn't move. Even after 2 hours after she recovered, even if she was very energetic, she could only continue to pretend to be sick. She couldn't even go outside to watch the dragon boat race. The imperial physician said that she came to the water and fell ill because of the humidity. Since she acquiesced to their words, she could only obediently curl up. Sun Yijia rarely saw Jingwan's pitiful appearance. He felt very happy and reached out to pinch her nose. Sun Yijia was in contact with Jingwan every day. She was very clear about the condition of her body. The so-called demonic energy had entered her body without any prior signs. It collapsed as soon as it came into contact with heavy moisture. It was more likely to be a lie. There must be something fishy about it. However, since Jingwan didn't say it, Sun Yijia didn't ask. Sister-in-law, you don't have to accompany me. You can play by yourself. It's the same thing every year. You'll only find it novel when you first come to the capital. It's just the same after playing a few more times. Besides, I don't play with those people. Ruan Fangfei is as famous as you, but she is so popular. What about you? You don't even have a confidant. You're too inferior. Jingwan made fun of him unceremoniously. Sun Yijia curled his lips indifferently. She didn't care about that kind of insincere friendship. There were indeed many people who flattered Ruan Fangfei. Could she find a confidant like Sister Wan to her? Don't joke. For Sun Yijia, it was better to have no confidants than to have a substandard one. One confidant was enough. As for those who couldn't wholeheartedly, even half a confidant was too much. You're in better spirits now. Really? Jingwan raised her hand. She did feel much better. I'll probably be able to get up after lying down for a while. She was dying just now, but after drinking the medicine for less than 2 hours, she was full of energy. This medicine was too miraculous, wasn't it? Once again, her guess was confirmed. However, this was also because Jingwan didn't deliberately hide it. Just then, Granny Gong came over and felt Jingwan's pulse. Her pulse was normal, and she nodded slightly. Jingwan smiled. Granny Gong, you know medicine? Sun Yijia asked curiously. Young mistress, I only know some pharmacology and know a few common pulses. I'm far from being skilled in medicine. In fact, Granny Gong not only knew basic pharmacology and was proficient in the art of maintenance, but she also knew the secret medicine used in the backyard. However, she didn't know what Ruan Fangfei used today. It was obvious that she hadn't learned it well. Sun Yijia nodded. As time went by, Jingwan completely recovered. However, even if she sat up, she still leaned against the big pillow. She was still eating melon seeds while talking to Sun Yijia. It was actually more interesting to eat melon seeds by herself. It was no fun to let others peel them. There seemed to be a sound coming from a moat. Is the dragon boat race about to begin? It's almost time. The dragon boat should go into the water, Sun Yijia said. If you want to watch, you can move the bed out. There's no wind now, so it's okay. Jingwan knew that Granny Gong and her grandmother would not object to her going out. However, in the eyes of others, she would probably be labeled as willful. Who cares? Willful is willful. It doesn't matter. Therefore, when Jingwan was carried out, the Luo family was surprised, but they didn't say anything. Most of them expressed their concern for her, and the rest didn't say anything. Among the same generation, the younger ones weren't in the shed. They probably went to the front. According to Sun Yijia, there was an open-air viewing walkway built on the edge of the riverbank, especially for those active children. They were relatively free today. As long as it wasn't too excessive, they could basically play wildly. A group of servant girls came to the Luo family's shed with a tray to see if anyone stood out. The tray was already piled with a lot of things. However, at a glance, it was obvious that they were all things for the women. This was completely for fun. It didn't matter if it was suppressed or not. Of course, there was no lack of people who really took this chance to gamble fiercely. Who knows, they might even make a real fire. Jingwan took off a gem-studded bracelet. Which one is Jin Qinhuang's? In any case, he was her future husband. At this time, of course, she had to give him face. One of the servant girls stepped forward, replying to Miss, "It's this servant." However, before she handed the tray over to take the things, another servant girl laid out a brocade handkerchief. Obviously, she wanted Jingwan to put the things on it. Jingwan slightly raised her eyebrows, somewhat puzzled. Even if she didn't like Jin Qinhuang, Sun Yijia still covered her mouth and laughed mockingly. This is specially used by the legitimate wife. Although you haven't married yet, it's understandable that you're using it now. If you don't stand out or suppress others, then there's fun to see. Jin Qinhuang is 22 years old, and in the end, he was reduced to the same level as the 11th or 12th princes. Ha ha ha. Jingwan was speechless. Why didn't she remind her earlier? What if she really didn't win? Of course, there definitely wouldn't be a situation where she won't win. Wouldn't it be letting others see Jin Qinhuang as a joke, as the main culprit? Then wouldn't the living king of hell tear her apart? This wasn't seeing Jin Qinhuang as a joke, but playing with her life. Jingwan put the bracelet on it. The others just casually expressed it. However, when everyone was giving Jingwan face by suppressing Jin Qinhuang, Luo Jingying, who had been silent all this time, used the most valuable thing on her body to bet on Prince Rue. Everyone's complexion wasn't good, but Luo Jingying acted as if nothing had happened. However, Jingwan didn't care. However, the other servant girl who followed her diligently wrote down everything one by one, then bowed and retreated. Their main purpose in coming to the Luo family's shed was still Jingwan. When they finally gathered in the imperial tent, it was clear at a glance that the first few Wang Ye had bet the most things, and the last two princes had bet the least. Adding up the men and women, it was probably a tray of things. Sure enough, it was just to make up the numbers. Kong Qinhuang and Rue Qinhuang were basically equal, with a total of 10 trays. Next was the Gong Qinhuang, and then Li Hanyuan had bet the most. This point was very unexpected. However, it seemed that most of them were things that were commonly used by young people. Lu Qingdi was very interested and asked the reason. The result was that Jin Qinhuang was the most playful, so it wasn't wrong to bet on him. Lu Qingdi's mouth twitched. Because everyone's things were placed right in front of the corresponding person, Li Hanyuan waved his hand to Mu Gonggong behind him. Bring it over. Mu Gonggong completely understood his master's meaning. He stepped forward picked up the brocade handkerchief and respectfully presented it. Li Hongyuan's expression didn't change as he took the bracelet, put a piece of blood jade in it, and let Mu Gonggong return it. Chapter 147. In fact, it was not a big deal for a corpse to appear in the moat. Even under the emperor's foot, it was quite normal for people to throw away corpses. No matter which dynasty it was and what kind of customs it was, this kind of thing was inevitable. It was just that the time and place of the murder was wrong. It was supposed to be a festive day, and everyone was in high spirits. Moreover, the moat was built around the city, and it was still there. The corpse could have been anywhere else, but it just had to appear here. Not only was it unlucky, but it was also disgusting. Therefore, Lu Qingdi's face was very gloomy. Where is the governor? The governor is already there. The corpse has been salvaged. It is a young woman. Judging from her clothes, she should be a maid. Preliminary judgment is that the time of death is no more than 2 hours. The commander of the Imperial Guards paused. Her face was slashed countless times. Except for the eyes, there was no intact part of her body. Her limbs were all broken and strangely twisted. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on the commander of the Imperial Guards. Their eyes were full of disbelief. Who did this? It was too vicious. In addition, there was no wind today. Although the moat was flowing, it flowed very slowly. It had been less than 2 hours, so the murderer must be nearby now. Daring to do such a thing under Lu Qingdi's nose, was it a provocation or a provocation? Lu Qingdi was furious. Immediately find out which family the maid is from. I have ordered to assist the governor in the investigation. If she is from a family, I believe there will be a result soon. Lu Qingdi nodded. Tell the others to postpone the dragon boat race for an hour. In addition, pay attention to the blockade of this matter. The so-called blockade was mainly aimed at ordinary people. Lu Qingdi liked to enjoy with the people, so he allowed them to watch from the other side. Of course, the other side was also guarded. The people could only stay outside the guarded area. At this time, the other side was already crowded with people. For them, today a murder in this special place was not as simple as bad luck. It might be regarded as a bad omen. In this way, it was easy to cause panic. Fortunately, the corpse was close to this side of the river, and because of the twisted limbs, it was basically impossible to see the shape of a human from far away. Thinking about it, even if some people on the other side of the river saw the thing that was salvaged from the river, they probably wouldn't associate it with a dead person. Following the departure of the Grand Commander of the Imperial Guards, the Imperial tent fell into silence. Previously, there was still a faint hint of open strife and veiled strife. Now it seemed to have completely disappeared, and there was even a hint of gloominess. Even on the other side of the curtain, Lu Qingdi's concubines, including the Empress, were no longer smiling and speaking softly. Although they didn't hear the words of the commander of the Imperial Guards clearly, the young concubines couldn't help but turn pale upon hearing the narration of the palace maids. Even people like the Empress, noble consort Su, felt a chill down their backs. They had killed more than 1 or 2 people, but they had never done it themselves and had never seen such a cruel scene. The Empress ordered and passed down the message, telling the servants serving the princesses and the younger princes to be more attentive. Don't let some messy things enter their ears, and even more, don't go to the scene to look out of curiosity. In Lu Qingdi's imperial tent, in addition to his sons and brothers, there were naturally some important ministers of the court. Whether it was true or false, they all wore a grave expression. Thus, Jin Wang, who had nothing to do with himself, still put on a leisurely posture as he played with a newly obtained bracelet in his hand. It seemed that it was a priceless treasure that he loved so much that he couldn't put it down. It was particularly irksome, and Lu Qingdi, who was easily angered by him, wanted to ruthlessly slap him. Luo Peishan also couldn't help but twitch his mouth when others weren't paying attention. Speaking of which, before, he really couldn't see that this living king of hell was interested in his own grandson. But now that he got what he wanted, it seemed that he was slowly no longer restraining himself. But even so, you should pay attention to the situation a little. There are so many pairs of eyes watching. Unfortunately, A certain someone didn't sense the roaring and unspoken criticism in everyone's hearts. He even moved his body and put on a more comfortable posture. In fact, Jin Wang's biggest characteristic shouldn't be his temperamental and violent temper, nor was it that outrageous fate of bringing misfortune to his wife. It should be that he was super thick-skinned and had reached this state of invulnerability. Because it had nothing to do with Jin Wang in the past, Luo Peishan simply respected Li Hongyuan's status. Now, he increasingly understood Lu Qingdi's mood. Unfortunately, he couldn't vent it out like Lu Qingdi. He was angry until he lost his temper. Even so, the oppressive feeling of his own family's fresh cabbage being eaten by someone else's pig was still there. Therefore, it was better for this son-in-law and grandson-in-law to be casually tidied up. If it didn't go well, he would pull them over and give them a fierce lecture. What a pity! What a pity! Li Hongming tilted his head to look at Li Hongyuan. He slightly narrowed his eyes and then turned to face Lu Qingdi. Fu Wang, sixth younger brother, seems to like the Luo family's third young lady more. You must know that before, Li Hongyuan didn't clearly express his disgust, but he also didn't seem to have come into contact with it. Except for Sun Yijia's disfigurement, which made his emotions more obvious. Before the incident, it didn't matter if he was happy or unhappy. However, Lu Qingdi was his father after all. Most of the time, he felt that he didn't care. This time, he sold his son and was worried that he would make trouble again. Now that he saw it, he shouldn't be disgusted. Then, his reaction was a bit strange. At this moment, Lu Qingdi also regarded him as protecting his food. This evil creature had a bad temper. When he was still in the palace, he showed a particularly overbearing side. As long as it was his, regardless of whether he liked it or not, even if it was thrown into a corner to collect dust, others shouldn't even think about touching it. If he wasn't willing to give it up, even if it was completely destroyed, he absolutely wouldn't give it to you. This virtue probably continued to extend to people. That's why he would use a piece of priceless blood jade to exchange for a bracelet that only looked passable. Forget it. As long as he was happy, it was fine as long as he was happy. Anyway, this was the last one. It would be best if he could marry her safely into the family. But if he couldn't, that's right, from the start, Lu Qingdi was not absolutely certain that his son would fall in love with a certain girl. Even if he liked something, it wouldn't be fresh for more than a few days. Hoping that he would be moved, hoping that he would have normal feelings, that would be a joke. Lu Qingdi didn't respond, and Li Hongming also retracted his gaze, as if he had just casually mentioned a sentence. Li Hongyuan acted as if he had heard it, and continued to study his bracelet. Looking at the quality of the gemstones, the craftsmanship of the bracelet, on the contrary, Ruanrui Zhong's gaze fell on Li Hongyuan. His heart was quite complicated. He didn't know what that daughter of his was thinking, to take a fancy to this living king of hell. He knew that his daughter had secretly contacted Jin Wang. Although he didn't know Jin Wang's attitude at that time, 8 or 9 out of 10, he didn't have the slightest feeling. His infatuation was misplaced. He tried his best to suppress it, even making people feel that he was too picky with his son-in-law. Who could understand his painstaking efforts? In the end, it was still inexplicably bestowed marriage by the emperor. Even if he was finally persuaded by his daughter, he was still not optimistic about his daughter's future, breeding a kind of powerless sorrow. The identity of the woman who was tortured to death was quickly confirmed. "What did you say, my daughter's servant girl?" Ruanrui Zhong asked in disbelief. "Grand Secretary Darren, it has already been confirmed. According to my understanding, your daughter's servant girl didn't return after changing her clothes. Your daughter had people looking for her, but couldn't find her. After hearing that the female corpse was found, your daughter immediately sent people to confirm. No matter if it was the clothes, hair accessories, or some of the subtle features on the body, it all matched your daughter's missing servant girl. The Grand Commander of the Imperial Guards stated the facts without the slightest bit of emotion. Ruanrui Zhong twisted his eyebrows. According to his wife, the 4 senior servant girls by his daughter's side were all extremely reliable. The one who had served her for a long time had already served her for 7 to 8 years. The one who had served her for a short time had also served her for 3 to 4 years. His daughter had a very good relationship with him. Now that she was gone, he didn't know how sad the girl would be. Have you found any other clues? Not for the time being. It's reasonable to say that no one would kill a mere servant girl for no reason. The Minister of Justice said, if there's no grudge or enmity, then it's very likely that she suddenly encountered some dark secrets and was killed to silence her. If it's really like this, shouldn't it be ended cleanly? Who would do so many tricks? Looking at the way she died, it's not an exaggeration to say that the murderer has a blood feud with her. No matter how lively they were talking, Li Hongyuan's heart didn't have the slightest ripple. It was also because he didn't find a suitable opportunity to make a move on Ruan Fangfei. She should be the one to suffer now. Li Hongyuan wouldn't kill her easily. What she did to Wan, he would return her tenfold or 100-fold. If he didn't let her taste pain and despair and wake her up, how could he let her die so easily if she was always so self-righteous? He wanted her to break down and repent. It would only be over if she regretted coming to this world. However, he didn't know if it was because Ruan Fangfei had done too many guilty things that there were several people around her at all times. Today, there were too many eyes, the Imperial Guards patrolling from time to time, and the blackguards appearing from time to time, so she temporarily escaped the disaster. That servant girl was just a warning to her. It was no wonder, but it was also not bad. She started to deal with the people around her, one by one, and let them pave the way for her on the road to the netherworld. As for the people closest to her, none of them were innocent. After all, they accompanied her day and night. How could they not know Ruan Fangfei's nature? Moreover, no matter how capable and scheming she was only a lady of the boudoir. If no one worked for her, how could she scheme against people again and again? Therefore, these people deserve to die. Even if they were really innocent, they could only be considered unlucky to follow such a master. They should clean their eyes when they were reincarnated in their next life. Speaking of which, even if they didn't know the specific situation in the backyard of the Ruan family, as long as they sent someone to investigate, of course, they had to be very careful. They would find that it was really not simple because the security was very strict. If there were no ghosts, how could there be people like secret guards and even death soldiers? Ordinary prince's mansion couldn't compare to them. It was just that for an official, what did he want to do by raising secret guards and death soldiers? Well, Li Hongyuan knew that Ruan Ruizhong didn't know that there was such a group of people in his family. Because of this, it wasn't easy for Li Hongyuan to place people in the Ruan family. Those who were placed and couldn't be casually used. After all, the risk of being exposed was too great. In contrast, the Luo family was like a sieve. Li Hongyuan could easily grasp the matters of the Luo family. However, it was obvious that the Luo family was considered normal. Even the backyards of those officials who liked to form cliques for personal gain were basically like this. Logically speaking, Ruan Fangfei didn't have the ability to manage the Ruan family's backyard like this, and it wasn't something that could be done overnight. Then, the biggest possibility was the person in charge of the Ruan family's backyard, Ruan Fangfei's mother, Ruan Ruizhong's wife. Li Hongyuan casually cast his gaze outside. The second wife of the Grand Secretary. After Ruan Fangfei heard the situation from the nanny, her face was a little pale. Then, despite being stopped by everyone, she insisted on taking a look for herself. The bailiff guarding the corpse saw that her hands were trembling uncontrollably and her face was drained of blood. She looked very pitiful and wanted to dissuade her, but Ruan Fangfei shook her head firmly. Her hands slowly reached for the cloth covering the corpse. Because her hands were trembling, she seemed to have used all her strength to barely pinch a corner and slowly lifted it. Ah! Ruan Fangfei screamed. Her legs went soft and she fell backwards. Fortunately, the person serving her supported her in time and covered her eyes at the first moment. The bailiff hurriedly covered the cloth back. He already told her not to look. They were used to seeing dead people and were frightened by the corpse's appearance at the first moment. The face was full of scratches. Only the eyes were staring like copper bells, showing the great pain and deep fear before death. Those who were less courageous would probably be scared out of their wits. Ruan Fangfei had done many evil things and was ruthless. She had even killed people with her own hands, but she was still punished badly. especially those eyes, which were staring straight at her, like a malicious spirit. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that those eyes made her suddenly think of a person who was strangled to death by her own hands. She did not know why she suddenly thought of this, but now her breathing was rapid, as if she was about to suffocate. Her eyelids fluttered and she fainted. "Miss!" The people around her all showed worried and frightened expressions. Jingwan and the others naturally knew about this matter very quickly. For those who did not know, 9 out of 10 people pitted Ruan Fangfei, and the rest were basically wondering if it was easy for her to get into the water today. Then there were even people who strangely mentioned Li Hongyuan's destiny of bringing misfortune to his wife. After all, this accident happened to his future princess and future concubine. The more they talked about it, the more they felt it was true. Even if Ruan Fangfei's problem was an indirect factor, it could not be denied. This matter even spread to Lu Chengdi's ears. As his father and as the emperor, Lu Chengdi did not suppress the rumors. Except that it was really unnecessary. Lu Chengdi also felt that it had something to do with him. Lu Chengdi looked at Li Hongyuan's indifference, as if a dead pig was not afraid of boiling water. At the same time, he was very angry and helpless. When he looked at Luo Peishan and Ruan Ruizhong, his eyes were full of guilt. "Beloved official Ruan and beloved official Luo, why don't you go back and have a look?" This imperial edict came awkwardly, but neither of them refused. Luo Peishan was also very worried about Jingwan. Although Madame Luo sent someone to tell him the situation, it was better to see it with his own eyes. When Jingwan saw Luo Peishan, she stared blankly and was about to get up to greet everyone. However, Luo Peishan waved his hand first, dispensing with all formalities. In passing, he sat next to Jingwan. "How is the girl?" "I made grandfather worry. Granddaughter is much better. But grandfather, why did you come back now?" Luo Peishan saw that her complexion was not bad. According to his old wife's temperament, if something really happened, she would not let her sit here. Thus, he did not say much and simply explained the reason why he came back. Jingwan was speechless. Jin Qin Wang had become a scapegoat. However, her suffering was mostly because of him, so he was not wronged. It was just that it had nothing to do with the so-called bringing misfortune to his wife. However, the death of Ruan Fangfei's maidservant, was it Jin Qin Wang's doing? Although he said that he would deal with it, did he know that it was Ruan Fangfei's doing? Moreover, that also meant that he was a quasi-Cifei and had better conditions than her in all aspects. What reason did he have to help her deal with Ruan Fangfei? It was completely illogical. Old Madame Luo called Luo Peishan to the inner room to talk to him alone. Although Ruan Fangfei's name shook the capital, for people like them, that little fame was simply a drizzle. Thus, they did not doubt the truth that his old wife told him. Luo Peishan did not fly into a rage. There was not even an angry expression on his face. Only his eyes were cold. "I originally thought that sitting in this position today was enough. But now, it seems that perhaps I can work harder and go to the cabinet." Old Madame Luo had never asked about his matters in the imperial court and his ambitions. "That maidservant of Miss Ruan, I'm afraid." Luo Peishan and old Madame Luo looked at each other with tacit understanding. They were at least 70% sure that someone was the mastermind. Luo Peishan thought for a while. For the sake of his grandson's protection, he would not pursue the matter of making him angry. The murderer was still being found, but the dragon boat race had been postponed for an hour. It could not be postponed any longer. Thus, today's highlight finally began. Because of the curtains on both sides, the view was blocked. In the midst of the sound of gongs and drums, the curtains on both sides were hung up. The length of the track was 400 feet. According to Jing Wan's estimation, Qiyuan's 1 qi was about a little more than 30 centimeters. 10 zhang was 10 qi, so 400 zhang was about a little more than 1,200 meters long. It wasn't considered short. The location of the imperial tent was 200 feet away from the track, and the Luo family was about 150 feet away from the starting point. It was still a few hundred meters away from the starting point. Moreover, They were sitting, so they could not see anything. Chapter 148. The dragon boat whizzed past in front of their eyes, and a group of children of all sizes chased after the dragon boat along the riverbank. They looked at the people who were waiting on the side, and their hearts trembled in fear. If they were to fall and let others step on them, dragon boats one after another passed by the river in front of the imperial tent. When they were adding to the fun, they all said that Six Brother was the best at playing. Now it looks like it wasn't fake at all. It looks like Six Brother will definitely win today. Li Hongyuan still had a lazy appearance, completely ignoring the Gong Prince's words. Towards this fourth brother, whose presence wasn't as strong as the other two, but who would jump around from time to time, Li Hongyuan was too lazy to pay attention to him. In the previous life, he was dealt with by Li Hongming, who added fuel to the fire and was directly imprisoned, not even half a year before he went to the Yellow Springs. So, he didn't need to do anything special, as long as people kept an eye on him, didn't let him out of his control, and then gave him a little push at the right time. The Gong Prince clenched his fists, blue veins popping out on the back of his hands. Obviously, someone's disregard made him very dissatisfied. As the fifth prince, the sickly Gong Prince was in a rare good state of mind today, but now that he was sandwiched between the fourth brother and sixth brother, his heart was clenched in pain. He glanced at his fourth brother. Sixth brother was rarely obedient. Why did they have to find trouble to provoke him? In the end, the one who suffered losses wasn't him. It was his life that was too comfortable. He had to look for trouble. It must be said that the Gong Prince was also miserable in the court. He belonged to the weakest side. His voice couldn't compare to the other two. Plus, there was the powerful Yu family, suppressed by all sides. Sometimes he felt that he was living a useless life. His heart was inevitably somewhat twisted. He couldn't tolerate others ignoring him. It would make him feel like he was being looked down upon. With so many ministers present, he felt even more embarrassed. The evil fire in his heart was strong. For a moment, he was a little dizzy. Sixth brother, fourth brother is talking to you. Is this the attitude you should have towards your older brother? That voice couldn't help but raise a few notches. Everyone's eyes couldn't help but turn to him. What, this filth also affected the Gong Prince today? His courage was this fat? The Gong Prince received the baptism of everyone's gazes and unconsciously puffed out his chest. He actually enjoyed this kind of attention, but he didn't know how many people were calling him an idiot in their hearts. Especially the left commander-in-chief, Qin Tianming, who knew Li Hongyuan's real background. He clicked his tongue in his heart. Li Hongyuan's head was so big, but he wanted to be the biggest in the world, not to mention whether he could snatch it or not. Even if he gave it to Li Hongyuan, he was not afraid of being crushed to death by the hat. Sixth brother, noisy. Li Hongyuan finally gave him a look, but it was cold without any warmth. What does it have to do with you whether I know how to play or not? Whether I win or lose, does it have anything to do with you? You, on the other hand, are betting a lot. You're just trying to look impressive. Think about how many times you can lose with that little bit of money you have. The Gong Prince abruptly stood up, his eyes looking like he wanted to swallow Li Hongyuan whole. Li Hongyuan sneered. Strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. Li Hongyuan. She was about to pounce on him and teach him a lesson. Enough. Old Fourth, sit down for Zhun, you disgraceful thing. The Gong Prince's head was dizzy, but he didn't lose his reason. For a while, he froze in place, and only after a while did he stiffly sit back down. Everyone else had the same thought. Luqing Emperor was biased towards Jin Qinhuang, so biased that there was no end to it. Knowing this, every one of them still brought shame to themselves. However, there were also people who wondered if Jin Qinhuang had some kind of demonic nature. No matter how rational a person was, they couldn't resist him. In the end, it was because he was too infuriating. In the end, it was because of jealousy. He didn't have any ability, but he had too much. Some people thought that among all the princes, Jin Qinhuang's private property was probably more than the sum of the other princes. So, if he didn't have the slightest idea, then he must have seen through the world of mortals and stepped out of the three realms. Prince Jin's dragon boat, from the very beginning, maintained the advantage, and the further it went, the larger it became. Moreover, it maintained this advantage until the very end. In the last 100 zhong, even if his dragon boat did its best to chase, it could only shorten the distance a little. However, those who were purely watching the fun never cared about who won or lost. They watched the process, felt the atmosphere, and enjoyed the festivity. In addition to the private bet, Li Hongyuan unceremoniously accepted all the other prizes. In addition to the people who bet on him, their things were returned to their original owners, and he also received 3 additional things of almost the same value. In fact, the general situation was the same, but who let him win? There were too many things, and he was happy. In other words, he had money, and he was willful. No one lost. Send the rest to the Luo family. It should be known that, after the prizes were divided, more than half of what was left was still not a small amount. He didn't even bat an eyelid and said to give it away. Sure enough, in front of such a master, you really didn't have any temper. However, didn't this mean that Jin Xinhuang really cared about this fiancé? 6th brother, can you give me the things that your 3rd sister-in-law bet? Li Hongming said with a smile. After all, Li Hongyuan was a gem in front of him. If he did something like using his own things to exchange, it would inevitably seem deliberate. So, he directly asked for it. First, it showed his attitude towards his Wang Fei, and second, it showed that his and Li Hongyuan's brotherly affection was something that others couldn't compare to. Don't look for Ben Wang. The things had already been given away. Li Hongming smiled, understanding his meaning. His attitude towards the Gong Prince was superior. So even if Jin Xinhuang's temper wasn't good, in fact, wasn't entirely his fault. If your attitude towards him was better, he would also be more amiable towards you. So, the Gong Prince could only chuckle. The things were picked up and sent away one by one. The things sent to the Luo family were naturally the most eye-catching. After knowing the reason, it caused a lot of commotion. Then, many people turned their eyes to the quiet Ruan family. They thought that even if she wasn't the Zhengfei, she could still dominate the Wangfu. Now, it seemed that it wasn't the case. Before, Jin Xinhuang didn't do anything, so they didn't think much of it. But now that he did, the difference was too obvious. In fact, most of the time, it wasn't the quantity or quality of the things, but the attitude. Even if Jingwan took the majority and Ruan Fangfei took a small part, no one would say anything. One side, it was reasonable to be unequal. Thus, Ruan Fangfei, who had always been very popular, attracted gossip at this time. It couldn't be helped, not everyone liked gold and silver. She, Ruan Fangfei, was naturally no exception. It didn't matter if there was no problem, but once there was a problem, she would definitely be hit while she was down. Some people even suspected that Ruan Fangfei didn't enter Jin Xinhuang Fu because she wasn't liked by Jin Xinhuang. After all, the time for her marriage was not long after Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia had already married someone else on the set wedding date. It was reasonable to say that she should enter the family soon after that. But now, Jin Xinhuang had a fiancé, and there was no movement on her side. Was it her turn after the Zhengfei? The Luo family's 3rd young lady hadn't reached marriageable age yet. Wait until next year, Ruan Fangfei would be 17. Moreover, the premise was that the Luo family's 3rd young lady wouldn't be jinxed. So what if her name shook the capital? So what if her talent suppressed the crowd? She was still an old lady who couldn't get married. At this time, Ruan Fangfei had already woken up. If it was someone else, they would probably hide this matter from her. However, her mother took the initiative to tell her before she heard any news. Ruan Fangfei looked at her gorgeous mother. She was almost 40 years old, but she didn't look like she was 31 years old. In the eyes of the world, she was a standard virtuous wife and mother. She treated the children left behind by the first wife as her own. Although Ruan Rui Zhong's eldest son was several years older than her, now that he had grandchildren, she had long become a cheap great-grandmother. Her children and grandchildren respected her. Ruan Rui Zhong valued her. There was nothing in the Ruan family's backyard that was beyond her control. Serving a man who was still dissatisfied with being her own father, was there really no complaints or regrets? Ruan Fangfei lowered her eyelids. It's just some worldly possessions. Mother, would I still care about those things? It's good that my son understands. The woman gently touched Ruan Fangfei's head. However, Ruan Fangfei didn't know that today was the beginning of all her pain. She only realized that Jin Xinhuang cared about others far more than her. This blow was just a drop in the ocean. When Jingwan received the gift, she didn't know what to say. Did Jin Xinhuang want to roast her or what? However, since it had already been sent, it was naturally impossible to return it. First, she took out the prize that she had bet. There's a mistake. This isn't mine. It was a very rare blood jade. The color was uniform and the head was full of water. Moreover, the head of the water looked very smooth and beautiful. Her bracelet, in terms of value, 10 of them couldn't compare to it. In terms of rarity, there was no need to mention it. That servant girl pursed her lips and smiled. Third young lady, it's this. Wang Ye used this jade to exchange for your bracelet. Jingwan was speechless again. She said that he didn't act according to common sense, but he really could do surprising things from time to time. He did it so openly and honorably. If she refused, she would be petty and at a disadvantage. Thus, she put away. Her attitude made the person who sent the gift unable to stop praising her. Soon after, Prince Rui's personal attendant respectfully explained his purpose for coming. Jingwan naturally didn't refuse. Which one is it? You could take it back. Because there were only a few things in the brocade handkerchief, it was very conspicuous. As for the other few things, I'll have to trouble Gong Gong to bring them back to the other Wang Fei. Third young lady is too polite. It's not troublesome. Jingwan directly used these things as a reward, letting each of them pick one thing. Among these objects, there were very precious ones, and naturally, there were also ordinary ones. The identity of the person who used them determined their level. Those who looked illustrious but didn't live up to their name. On this important occasion, they had no choice but to dress up and go out. Losing one of these things was enough for them to feel heartache, but there was no other way. These people were also sensible. Each of them picked one of the more average value, expressed their thanks, and then left in turn. Looking at the remaining things, to tell the truth, unless it was someone close to her, Jingwan didn't have any interest in using the things that had been used by outsiders, no matter how precious or beautiful they were. To put it bluntly, it was disgusting. Jingwan looked at her brothers and sisters who had basically all returned and smiled. I'm presenting Buddha with borrowed flowers today. See if there's anything you like, pick a few. Pausing, Mama, take a look first, see if there's anything that's against the rules and can't be used. If there is, pick it up first. Yes. Granny Gong nodded and checked the contents of each tray. Young lady, there's nothing here. Generally speaking, this kind of situation wouldn't happen, but there was nothing wrong with being cautious. If because of her, she implicated her family, that was not what Jingwan was willing to see. What are you still doing? Hurry up and choose. Or is it that none of these things are to your liking? Third sister, after all, these are given to you by Jin Xinhuang. Before Luo Jingda finished his words, Luo Jingbua patted him lightly. Since it's a gift to younger sister, it's natural for younger sister to handle it. Even if it's a gift from the emperor, except for some special things, there's nothing that can't be given away. Many of these things, younger sister can't use them. Just treat it as helping her. I won't be polite. As he said this, he reached out and took a fan pendant from the nearest tray. With him taking the lead, the others were no longer restrained and began to happily pick what they liked. Third sister, these things seem to be given to the Luo family, not to you. These things should be returned to the palace. As soon as these words came out, everyone stagnated and looked at Luo Jingying. Speaking of annoying people, sometimes they were really annoying. Who didn't know that it was just an excuse and not a formal New Year's gift? Moreover, it was in the palace. How shameless would she be to say such words? No one asked you to stretch out your hand. Old Madame Luo said coldly. Pick what you want. Why do you care about her? Luo Jingying was originally not very likable. After knowing that she was going to enter the Rue family as a concubine, perhaps they thought of something themselves, or perhaps someone else said something to them. In short, when she went out today, no one paid attention to her. In fact, no one knew what would happen to her in the future. After all, it was the Rue family. As the person most likely to become the new emperor, it was far better to be on good terms with her than to be on bad terms with her. But in fact, no one in the Luo family did so. To a certain extent, this showed the attitude of the two elders towards her. At the same time, it was also the influence of the Luo family. They happily continued to pick things. Between the young girls, they also compared things to each other. However, the things that were suitable for them were few in number, and the value was not high. After all, they came from the young girl who angered him. Luo Jingying bit her lip and shrank to one side. Finally, she thought about it and walked to old Madame Luo. Grandmother, granddaughter is not feeling well. I want to go back first. No one has time to send you back. No need to send me back. I can go back by myself. You can't even stay at home for half a day. If you go outside, I'm afraid you won't be able to find your way home. Stay here obediently. How could Luo Jingying not understand the meaning of old Madame Luo's words? Her face turned green and white, and she cursed in her heart. When the other adults heard old Madame Luo's words, they thought in their hearts, as expected, this kind of thing should not lead her child astray. It's right to stay away from her. Chapter 149. Luo Jingying was furious after being reprimanded by old Madame Luo. After all, she was a girl and naturally wanted to save face. Being reprimanded in front of so many people, not only the masters of the Luo family, but also the servants who served her. She was so ashamed that she wanted to die. These people had always believed in flattering the strong and trampling on the weak. As the old madam of the inner residence, even if she was not in charge of the household, her attitude could almost determine a person's honor, disgrace, or even life and death. Luo Jingying was worried about her own feelings and even wished that the news was good. Because of this, she did not notice that she had actually been excluded from the Luo family. Other than the fact that she was still a member of the Luo family, the treatment she received in the Luo family was no different from that of someone who had been expelled from the family. And after she entered Prince Rui's residence, this point gradually became more and more apparent. In the beginning, she relied on Prince Rui's favor and was arrogant and condescending. When the people in Prince Rui's residence realized that she was actually no different from an orphan, Prince Rui would immediately withdraw his favor. He might even attribute all the fault to Luo Jingying's deceit, because everything he did to the Luo family did not achieve his goal. As long as he was cold, he did not say or do anything, and Luo Jingying would fall into hell. With her EQ and IQ, she would definitely be played to death. However, Li Hongming probably would not let her die. After all, she was a daughter of the Luo family. If she died, Luo Peishan would not ignore it for the sake of the Luo family's reputation. Even if he did not want to become enemies with Li Hongming, he was afraid that he would become enemies with him. This was naturally something that Li Hongming did not want to see. The Luo family did not care about this fourth young lady at all, as long as outsiders did not know. Therefore, her surname was Luo. As long as she carried this name, she had to be prepared to be completely exploited. If she lost her value, she would not be far from death. Luo Ronping had already realized that it wasn't safe to use his daughter's marriage. Although he didn't want to admit it, the reason why Prince Rui valued him so much wasn't because of his talent, but because his father was Luo Peishan. A person who was completely liked by the target was a good-for-nothing. Luo Ronping had to find a way to create an illusion that Luo Jingying was not Luo Peishan's favorite granddaughter, but she was not bad. Otherwise, he was worried that he would also become a good-for-nothing. Luo Ronping was lost in thought. Mrs. Lu lowered her head and pulled her handkerchief from time to time. She was somewhat out of tune with the lively atmosphere. Luo Peishan remembered everyone's reaction from the beginning to the end, but did not speak. In any case, Luo Ronping was also his son. He had also spent a lot of energy on him, but Luo Ronping repeatedly refused to listen to his advice. He agreed on the surface, but disobeyed in secret. Because he did not help him advance in his career, he harbored hatred in his heart. Now, he even betrayed the family. Sometimes, Luo Peishan even wanted to simply remove him from the Luo family and end all troubles. However, In the end, he still had reason. This kind of thing could not be done casually. Moreover, Luo Rongping's actions could not even be shown on the surface. However, there was one thing that must be done, and that was he cannot be allowed to continue jumping around. But what should be done specifically? Jingwan asked people to pick out the good things from the remaining things. Even if she did not use them herself, she could use them as gifts to others or use them to reward people in the future. As for the remaining things, it was simple and crude to deal with them. Gold and silver were all melted down, and other things like gems were all dismantled and reused to make other things. Jingwan's method, under normal circumstances, was the usual method of dealing with old things. However, these things were sent by Jin Qinhuang. Wasn't it not very good to do so? Jingwan just smiled and did not say a word. Although they did not gather together for the lunch banquet, the things were prepared by each family. However, at this time every year, Lu Qingdi would give out rewards. In addition to the necessary things for the Dragon Boat Festival, such as dumplings, he would also give out some dishes as rewards. Every time this kind of special day, it was to reflect who among the courtiers were in the emperor's heart. Of course, Lu Qingdi, due to various considerations, would not completely follow his own likes and dislikes. However, from some small details, everyone would often be able to deduce the truth. It was a big crime to speculate about the emperor's intentions, but as a courtier, if you completely did not think about the emperor's thoughts, you would probably be out of the game if you were not careful. The Luo family was given 6 dishes, and all of them were dishes with good meanings. There were more than 100 dumplings, with all kinds of flavors. It was just that the number of dumplings was a bit too much. It should be known that the emperor gave out food, and everything must be finished. It could not be given to the servants, as that would be seen as looking down on the emperor's prestige. Luo Peishan waved his hand and kept a part of it, and the rest were all given out. Every in-law's family had a share, including the Chun family. In this way, each family did not have much. That was something bestowed by the emperor. How many people wanted it, but could not get it? Therefore, when they knew the origin of these dumplings, there was not a single person who was not happy. Each dumpling was divided and divided. What could reach each person's mouth was not a big piece, but it made the people who ate it feel that it was the best delicacy in the world, and they enjoyed eating it very much. Even though it was already May, the rewarded dishes could not escape the cold fate. Moreover, there was no such thing as eating cold food on a hot day. Jingwan paid special attention to food, so she was not very interested in these dishes. Father, there were only 2 dishes last year, but there are twice as many this year. Is this? Luo Peishan waved his hand. After being promoted to the Minister of Personnel, it is natural to add 1 more dish. The other 3 dishes are for the 3rd daughter. Don't think that your father is so important to the emperor that ordinary people can't compare with him. Well, they all understood. However, these dishes were not designated to anyone. Luo Peishan waved his hand again, and the dishes were divided. More than 2 hours after lunch, Lu Qingdi took the concubines and the princes and princesses back to the palace. As for the murderer of the murder case, there was still no clue, which made Lu Qingdi a little annoyed. It also proved that this was not an ordinary murder case. However, no one could say for sure what the reason was. In addition, his son and his officials had a private bet with each other. The new hatred and the old hatred added together, which naturally made him angry. One of his good sons, because he lost, let people beat the participants of the competition half to death, and then directly drag them away without asking any more questions. If something went wrong, these people might lose their lives. Lu Qingdi couldn't wait to tie him up and beat him fiercely. This idiot, didn't he know how to deal with it privately? Yes, in Lu Qingdi's view, his fault was not that he beat people, but that he beat people at the wrong time and place, which was easy to be criticized. Just wait and see. He would definitely be impeached by the imperial censor tomorrow. Everyone knew that Lu Qingdi was in a bad mood now, so naturally, no one went to find trouble with him. Others didn't find trouble with him, but God continued to make trouble for Lu Qingdi. Before Lu Qingdi stepped into the palace gate, he heard the report again. Lord Ruan's beloved daughter was on the way back to the mansion. The horse was frightened and the carriage overturned. Miss Ruan was thrown out of the carriage and almost died under the horse's hooves. Lu Chengdi was shocked and angry. "Have you checked whether it was an accident or man-made?" Replying, "Your Majesty, this lowly one has not investigated." However, after asking the Ruan family, they were very certain that it was an accident. The horse that pulled the carriage was ill, and the coachman who raised the horse did not discover it in time. The horse suddenly became ill and went crazy today, causing the accident. The commander of the Imperial Guards answered dutifully. Lu Chengdi frowned, but he looked relieved. No one saw it, or they might imagine that there was a love and hate drama between Lu Chengdi and Ruan Fangfei, and Lu Chengdi made his son a cuckold. "Out is Ruan Fangfei. Your Majesty, after Miss Ruan was thrown out of the carriage, she has been in a coma, and her face may have been hurt." Under normal circumstances, this matter would not be reported to Lu Chengdi immediately. But because Ruan Fangfei's maid had been tortured and killed before, it was not that no one suspected that the other party's target might be Ruan Fangfei. Now that this happened, it was inevitable that there would be doubts. In fact, when this matter was reported to Lu Chengdi, it was to ask whether this matter needed to be investigated thoroughly with the previous murder case. Don't worry about it. Since the Ruan family said it was an accident, he would not do anything unnecessary. Lu Chengdi ordered the chamberlain to tell the empress to send someone to check. In fact, it was more subtle to see if Ruan Fangfei's face was really hurt. And how serious was the injury? After returning to the palace, the empress left first with the excuse that she was busy with palace affairs. Imperial concubine Su stood beside Lu Chengdi. Looking at Lu Chengdi's frown, she reached out and gently stroked it, very worried. Lu Chengdi held her hand, and there was an atmosphere between the two that outsiders could not get in. This made those favored concubines who wanted to get close to Lu Chengdi feel jealous and embarrassed at the same time. Thinking of Imperial concubine Su's means, they could only give up resentfully. When the Imperial concubine and Lu Chengdi were together, the palace servants consciously retreated a little. Lu Chengdi held Imperial concubine Su's hand and slowed down as if taking a stroll. As they walked, he suddenly sighed. "What did I say? Ruan Fangfei, this girl, might also have an accident. Look, it's true." Imperial concubine Su remembered the conversation she had with Lu Chengdi. She had an accident, and it was not Yuan who did anything to her. How can Yuan be blamed? This is too unfair. If I were to say, it's all their bad luck. Lu Chengdi firmly believed that his evil son had jinxed his wife, but Imperial concubine Su had always been unwilling to admit it. Imperial concubine Su, who had always been gentle in front of him, often talked back to him when she talked about that evil son's marriage. Lu Chengdi laughed. This is not the first time this has happened. Even now, you still refuse to admit it. It's nonsense. Why do I have to admit it? I have a hunch that this time, the Luo family's third miss will be able to marry Yuan smoothly. At that time, I will naturally shut those who say that Yuan jinxes his wife. Those people included him, the emperor. Although your Majesty has decreed the marriage, the 3 letters and 6 rites have not been completed yet. Your Majesty, this concubine will not accompany you any longer. This concubine has to go and instruct the people in the Ministry of Internal Affairs to quickly settle the marriage. She did not wait for Lu Chengdi's response and hurriedly left after bowing. Lu Chengdi stood in the same place, confused. In the end, he could only sigh helplessly. When everyone returned to the Ruan family, whether it was the masters or the servants, they were all silent. There were not many people left in Ruan Fangfei's room. Other than Ruan Ruizong and his wife, there were only a few people who served Ruan Fangfei. Among them, 2 servant girls were still kneeling upright. The imperial physician had already left. Ruan Ruizong looked at his wife sitting by the bed and silently holding his daughter's hand. His heart ached. He walked forward and patted her shoulder. "Madam, don't worry. Didn't the imperial physician say that our daughter's injuries aren't very serious and will recover soon? The injury on her face isn't a big deal. Although it can't be completely healed, it won't be very obvious. Old Madame Ruan, who was as beautiful as a young woman, raised her head to look at Ruan Ruizhong. She forced a smile. Master, I am fine. You're busy. Later, your Majesty will hold a banquet in the palace. You should go. What his wife said was true. Ruan Ruizhong could only leave for the time being. After returning from the palace, I will come to see Feng Fei. When Ruan Ruizhong left, the expression on old Madame Ruan's face changed completely. You two go and receive your punishment. Her voice was bone-chilling. The two servant girls couldn't help but tremble. However, they didn't dare to say a single word. After they left, another man who looked slightly thin and weak with no sense of presence came in and stood respectfully beside Madame Ruan. Master, are we really going to let this matter go? Not over. What else can we do? Old Madame Ruan gritted her teeth and said, ever since she married Ruan Ruizhong, she had never been so aggrieved. The other party dared to act so brazenly. They must have some understanding of us. The fact that they were able to hinder all of you who were escorting Feng Fei is the best proof. The enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. You should know that once the matter of the Ruan family's backyard is exposed, what will happen to us? Although we can't do anything on the surface, we must investigate clearly in the dark. What is the origin of the other party? She thought that everything was under control. However, she didn't expect that there was such a terrifying enemy hiding in the dark. If everything was under the other party's nose, she shuddered at the thought. Master, rest assured, this little one will investigate clearly as soon as possible. And you can go. This little one will retire. Old Madame Ruan sat quietly for a moment. Feng Fei, don't worry. Mother will avenge you. Ruan Ruizhong believed that Ruan Feng Fei was an accident so easily? Yes. Not to mention that he didn't think that anyone would deliberately harm his daughter, because there was really no reason. Furthermore, his second wife took care of everything in the Ruan family so well that he didn't need to spend any effort. His trust in his second wife was a little blind, which led to him not knowing anything about the matters in the backyard. It must be said that such a shrewd and wise man like him had fallen into such a trap. Unfortunately, he didn't know about it himself. Who knew what kind of reaction he would have when he found out in the future? Who knew if he would be pitiful or sad? Perhaps it was because he had never suffered a loss from a woman that he would be like this. And in Jinqin Wang Fu, Li Hongyuan sat in the shadows of his bedroom, making his whole person somewhat blurry and unreal. Master, the ointment has already been applied on Ruan Feng Fei's face. It will take effect in a month. At that time, a black scar will grow on her face like a centipede. And Jiu stood beside an E and said respectfully. Li Hongyuan faintly made a sound of an. Master, this subordinate has something that I don't understand. Today's matter will inevitably alert the enemy. What Ben Wang wants is precisely to alert the enemy. A venomous snake that hid too well. Once it was startled, it wouldn't let it swim out. Instead, it would shrink even tighter and become more cautious, because it knew who the enemy was in a place it didn't know and how strong they were. Today's matter made it understand that they were definitely not weak. Also, it wasn't easy to deal with Ruan Feng Fei using conventional methods, so it was better to use unconventional methods. This time, it was Nanny Gong's turn to be surprised. Even if Luo Jingying was like that, Miss didn't want her to die. She didn't even have much hatred for her. Although Miss said that it took feelings to hate someone, she just ignored them. Ruan Feng Fei was definitely the first person who could make Jingwan want her to die. It could be seen that Ruan Feng Fei really stepped on Miss's reverse scale this time. Yes, Miss had always cared about her family, more than herself. Of course, in Miss's eyes, her family probably didn't include everyone in the Luo family, but only a few. Her heart was soft and indifferent. She could care about the whole world, but she could also care about a few people. Feelings were mutual. She had done this to the extreme. However, once someone received her sincere treatment, they would probably feel that they were the happiest person in the world. Miss wanted Ruan Feng Fei to die. In fact, it was not difficult for the prince to make up his mind to kill someone. What needed to be looked at was the price to pay and the consequences. Miss, if it doesn't affect you at all, do you want her to die directly or suffer a lot before she dies? Jingwan looked at Nanny Gong. Although Nanny Gong still looked serious, Jingwan felt that her question was very strange. Under normal circumstances, she wouldn't ask this question. However, Jingwan's answer to this question was still very clear. It's too easy for a person with such a vicious mind to die so casually. Based on her meticulous and skillful way of doing things, and the fact that she was able to target others as if they were her prey despite having no enmity with them, I'm definitely not the first person to do so. For those who have been hurt by her, it's too much to just let her die to atone for her sins. Nanny Gong nodded and understood. Judging from the prince's plan, he wouldn't easily take Ruan Fangfei's life. It was good that Mrs. Idea didn't conflict with his plan. Jingwan always felt that it was impossible to have a twisted mind. Well, she couldn't be 100% sure about this. However, even if there were congenital perverts, there should be very few of them. Ruan Ruizong was in the center of the country's centralized power. The possibility of him not giving himself away at all was infinitely close to zero. Then, the person who caused Ruan Fangfei's character was more likely to be her mother. Nanny, do you know the wife of the Prime Minister? Madame Ruan? When Jingwan heard Nanny Gong call her that, she was immediately embarrassed. It wasn't that she hadn't seen her before. She looked really young, but she turned out to be a madam. Well, it was because Ruan Ruizhong's seniority was high. If she married him, she would probably be a madam from the beginning. Although she didn't have to play the leveling game of young madam, and madam, for a young woman, probably no one was willing to go all the way. Facing the daughters-in-law, who were much older than her, and hearing them call her madam, Jingwan actually wanted to ask how big the shadow in the heart of Madame Ruan was in the heart. However, no matter what she thought, she couldn't reveal a single word. Jingwan lit a row of candles for her in her heart. Everyone said that she was the most virtuous person in the whole capital. Nanny Gong briefly told Jingwan what everyone knew. Of course, she was now very sure that she was just like her daughter. It was fake. Nanny Gong didn't know the real situation of Ruan Fangfei, so naturally, she didn't know the real situation of her mother. After hearing Nanny Gong's words, Jingwan's first reaction was that she was just like Ruan Fangfei. She was too perfect to be real. This kind of person was most likely problematic. Therefore, Jingwan ruled out the slight possibility that Ruan Fangfei was a congenital abnormality. However, in the short term, Ruan Fangfei probably didn't have time to come out and cause trouble, which also meant that she couldn't take revenge. If she couldn't see this person, there was naturally no need to talk about anything else. Therefore, if the enemy didn't show up, it was useless to think about revenge. Jingwan wouldn't let her enemy affect her life, but Ruan Fangfei would never be so important to her. Later, Madame Luo sent more mugwort and other things to Jingwan's yard. She also ordered her to always carry the Buddha beads given by Master Liaochen with her in the future. Even if it didn't match her clothes, she had to use another way to carry it. Jingwan knew Madame Luo's intention, so she didn't object on this matter. In fact, Jingwan liked the Buddha beads very much. 2 days passed in a hurry. Luo Jingying was about to go out. The Luo family didn't decorate with lanterns or decorations, and there were no guests. It was quiet, just like any other day. There was a small sedan chair with green cloth parked at the side door of the Luo family. Perhaps to show that they attached great importance to Luo Jingying. Those who came to the Luo family to pick her up were a dignified nanny, a steward, and 4 maids by Li Hongming's side. It was reasonable to say that the nanny should bring people to pick her up, but the Luo family refused. It meant that they didn't want to trouble the people of the prince's mansion. They couldn't blame them if they didn't go in. Although it was because they didn't attach great importance to the girl, they didn't think much about it, because it was the Luo family's idea. However, they didn't know that in the 3rd branch of the Luo family, Luo Jingying was having a big argument with her mother for the first time in history. To be more precise, it was Luo Jingying who was throwing a tantrum one-sidedly. Because in the end, Luo Jingying only brought a bag of 5,000 taels of silver, most of which were given by Prince Rui. When Luo Jingqiang got married, she had 5,000 taels of silver as her savings. Now, without dowry, she only had 5,000 taels of silver. She couldn't even compare to Luo Jingqiang, who was born of a concubine. How did she let go? Naturally, she flew into a rage and smashed everything. What could you do with 5,000 taels of silver? If it was in an ordinary family, 5,000 taels of silver was enough for 4 people to eat for a lifetime. But in an ordinary family, the dowry for a daughter of an official was about 3 to 5,000 taels of silver. To a certain extent, this was already very good. It could be seen that the Luo family had accumulated a certain amount of wealth over the past 200 to 300 years. This sentence was not just empty words. However, in a real rich family, 5,000 taels of silver couldn't buy a set of decent head ornaments, nor could it buy a few boxes of the best rouge and face powder. Of course, Luo Jingying didn't know that the new boutique set of the Rouge Pavilion could only be bought with 5,000 taels of silver. Therefore, in Luo Jingying's eyes, this amount of money was like sending away a beggar. Mrs. Lu sneered, "If I really give a beggar 5,000 taels of silver, his fate can be changed. He will be grateful to me. Giving you 5,000 taels of silver is like throwing a meat bun to a dog. Take it or leave it. If you don't want it, then get out. Our third branch can't use up 5,000 taels of silver in a year. It just so happens that I'm short of money now." Luo Jingying looked at her mother with a broken face. Although Mrs. Lu had been ignoring her these days, she thought that Mrs. Lu was still angry and wouldn't ignore her. But today, she really understood that her mother really didn't care about her. When Mrs. Lu knew that she was going to enter Prince Rui's mansion, she was very happy and wanted to prepare things for her. But now, she was ruthless to this extent. From childhood to adulthood, was her mother's love for her all fake? Mrs. Lu's attitude towards Luo Jingying was actually not too abrupt. After being disappointed again and again, she was a little cold-hearted. But Luo Jingying didn't notice it, and Mrs. Lu didn't notice it herself. After finding out that Luo Jingying was an ungrateful wretch, she suddenly burst out and acted ruthlessly and ruthlessly. Good. Since it's like this, from now on, we'll break off all ties. Even if you kneel at my feet and beg me in the future, don't think that I'll call you mother again. Luo Jingying angrily picked her up and turned to leave. Luo Jingying indeed didn't call Mrs. Lu mother in front of her again. It wasn't like she said, even if Mrs. Lu knelt and begged, she wouldn't call her mother, but she didn't have the chance. In the future, when she was in pain and despair, how many days and nights did she call her mother, but she never got a response. Chapter 151. Although Nanny Lu had such doubts, she didn't ask. It was better for Prince Rui's mansion to not bring anyone with him. The servants would be arranged by them. From the beginning, all the initiative would be in their hands. This person would also be under their control. Therefore, they didn't need to care about her actual situation. Whether it was good or bad, it was all up to Prince Rui's mansion. Although Luo Jingying was a little stupid, she didn't want people in Prince Rui's mansion to see that she was not liked by her family. That would be too embarrassing. Although she believed that Prince Rui wouldn't dislike her because of this, it would be better for her to get along well with her family. Luo Jingying was confident and a little conceited. However, she had been ignoring the uneasiness in her heart. She repeatedly clamored to others to show that she would be unspeakably noble in the future. She was also using this method to hypnotize herself over and over again. Only in this way could she maintain her pride. Because everyone had their own thoughts, Luo Jingying directly got into the sedan chair without saying anything after a reserved and shy salute. When the curtain of the sedan chair was put down, the smile on Luo Jingying's face could no longer be maintained. There was no doubt that she yearned for the prince's mansion. However, she was now sitting in this small sedan. The people who were just a short distance away were all strangers to her. She felt an inexplicable sense of panic. Subconsciously, she turned sideways and lifted the curtain of the window. She looked at the door that was gradually shrinking. Nanny Lu subconsciously wanted to scold Luo Jingying. However, when she saw Luo Jingying's longing expression and the tears that she held back, she didn't say anything in the end. Perhaps this was the last time they would see each other, so she didn't need to be so strict. On the other hand, Prince Rui had invited his brothers to a banquet today. Even though he had only invited a concubine, he was still very happy. After all, the brothers were often on good terms with one another, using various excuses to get to know each other. However, after knowing the identity of his concubine, it was obvious that he wasn't just looking for an excuse to invite them to a banquet. Under these circumstances, Li Hongming was able to silently carry the young lady of the Luo family back to the Fu. No one would believe that there was no problem here, especially Prince Kong. The way he looked at Li Hongming was as if Prince Rui had snatched away his woman. Li Hongming's smile was still there, and there was even a hint of provocation in it. He didn't steal his woman. Prince Kong was so angry that he almost smashed his cup. Luo Romping. How dare he give his daughter to his biggest enemy when he swore to be loyal to him? Anyway, even if they were brothers, they would only pretend in front of Lu Qingdi occasionally. Prince Kong flicked his sleeves and left. Prince Kang's hardcore brothers also made excuses to leave one after another. Li Hongming just smiled and sent them off. He had no intention of asking them to stay. As long as he achieved his goal, he didn't need to care about anything else. As for how Luo Romping would appease his good brother's anger, that was his own business. If he couldn't even handle such a small matter, how could he work for him? After Prince Kong returned to the Fu, he directly summoned Luo Romping without saying anything. He even made a big fuss. His intention was actually similar to Li Hongming's. Therefore, a small matter that was originally a small matter was made into a big deal by these two brothers. However, because of the Luo family's position, there were many twists and turns. Other people didn't express their opinions on this matter for the time being. Besides, they actually wanted to know when the Grand Secretary offended the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel. After all, Luo Peishan's actions against Ruan Ruizong were too obvious. Except for some things that didn't need to be considered at all, every time Ruan Ruizong raised an opinion, Luo Peishan would hold a completely leftist opinion. In addition, Ruan Ruizong students were also implicated by Luo Peishan. Those who were related to Ruan Ruizong and had a close relationship with him were all people that Luo Peishan focused on taking care of. Therefore, no matter which side these people belonged to, there were signs of danger everywhere. After all, Ruan Ruizong was someone who had been in the officialdom for decades. The people who were close to him were not only his relatives and friends, but also many of his students. They were inexplicably implicated by him. Even if Luo Peishan was doing things by the book, he didn't do anything to anyone else but him. As soon as Ruan Ruizong discovered that the situation was wrong, he summoned Luo Peishan. As the saying goes, even if you die, you have to know the reason why. Unfortunately, all he got in return was Luo Peishan's mockery and ridicule. As for the specific reason, he didn't get a single word. No matter how astute the Grand Secretary was, without the slightest hint, he still couldn't guess the reason. However, Ruan Ruizong still knew Luo Peishan's character. Even if he was an old fox in the officialdom, he still adhered to some principles and kept some bottom lines. Because of this, Ruan Ruizong didn't take any action for the time being. Since he couldn't get the reason from Luo Peishan, he would investigate from other places. However, this matter must be done quickly. Otherwise, when Luo Peishan presented some evidence of his crimes to Lu Qingdi, he would suffer immeasurable losses. Even if he was neutral, Qi Yuan's officialdom couldn't be supported by one person. Prince Kong had never been a good-tempered person. When he saw Luo Romping, he directly kicked him. If it weren't for someone who stopped him, even if Luo Romping didn't die, he would be half dead. Luo Romping's explanation of Prince Kong was naturally to push all the blame to Li Hongming, saying that Prince Rui had abducted his daughter. As for the matter that his daughter was going to marry into Prince Rui's mansion, he didn't know until 2 days ago. At that time, he came to see Prince Kong. You didn't see me, so it has nothing to do with me. Prince Kong also knew from the gatekeeper that Luo Romping did see him, and he did refuse to see him. Li Hongyi would never admit that Li Hongming's complacency today had a small part to do with him. Although Li Hongyi let Luo Rongping leave, the suspicion in his heart didn't disappear. In other words, after Luo Rongping's daughter entered Li Hongming's backyard, it was impossible for him to completely trust him. In-laws were the most mainstream way to build relationships. Therefore, Prince Kong issued an order to keep an eye on Luo Rongping. Once the evidence of his betrayal was found, Prince Kong would never let him go. Li Hongming knew from the beginning that Luo Rongping's daughter entered his backyard, and he was purely a chess piece to contain the Luo family. Luo Peishan, who was in such a high position, was not trusted by his good brother because of his alienation, let alone Luo Rongping. Therefore, it was a big joke for him to be a nail in Li Hongyi's camp. He didn't care at all how Li Hongyi would deal with Luo Rongping. He even hoped that Li Hongyi would be as ruthless as possible. As for Li Hongyuan and Jingwan's marriage, under the supervision of imperial concubine Su, the auspicious date was quickly set. Because Li Hongyi was the eldest son, when he married, the things he used, no matter what, were naturally the best. The rest of the princes would more or less be subtracted from this foundation. For example, Li Hongming, Li Hongyuan, who had a mother who was favored and had a high status, at most, would be subtracted by 1 level. The imperial household department had long been familiar with preparing the betrothal gifts for Jin Qinhuang. It was still the same as before, so the speed was very fast. However, just when they thought that everything was ready, the living king of hell personally came. After taking a look at the things, he said 1-word exchange. Then, he directly left his personal attendant behind. Then Mu Gonggong smilingly watched the imperial household department exchange things. Once, twice, thrice Mu Gonggong shook his head. The people of the imperial household department were very irritable, but they couldn't vent a single word. They could only curry favor with Mu Gonggong in hopes of giving pointers. Then, Mu Gonggong mercifully gave a sentence Wang Ye was not short of money, and even more not short of good things. They understood. Wasn't it because the quantity and quality of the things they prepared were insufficient? But even if they understood, they wanted to curse their mother even more. There was no other way. This kind of thing was not something they could decide. They could only report it to the Empress. The Empress was naturally very tolerant. With a wave of her hand, Jin Qinhuang could do whatever he wanted. With his sentence, they were relieved. Then, they exchanged things one by one. The quantity doubled, and tripled. When Mu Gonggong nodded his head in satisfaction, the people of the imperial household department were simply about to collapse. However, when they saw the final list, their hands trembled and their hearts trembled. This was probably more than all the other Wang Ye's gifts added together. After thinking about it, they finally gave the list to the Empress again. After the Empress saw it, she was silent for a long time. According to the moral character of that living king of hell, if they didn't satisfy him, would he prepare it himself? A dignified Qinhuang had to prepare betrothal gifts himself. The emperor's face didn't need any more. But this thing was really too much. In terms of value, it was even more than the betrothal gifts of the Qinhuang Fei. Finally, the list was handed over to Lu Qingdi. For this kind of thing, Lu Qingdi naturally wouldn't care. He didn't even look at the list. On the contrary, Su Gue Fei felt that it was a bit inappropriate. Moreover, for what reason did her son do this? Was it really because he fancied Luo Sangunyang, or was there some other reason? On the day of the wedding, the people of Jin Qinhuang Fu sent over a pair of wild geese. Not only were they full of spirit, they were taller than the average wild geese. Their feathers were also smooth and bright. Looking at the 2 pure gold wild geese, no matter how gorgeous they were also dead objects without the slightest bit of spiritual energy. The pure gold wild geese were naturally abandoned. The Luo family, the wedding invigilator, presented the ceremonial items in the courtyard. When the Luo family saw these things, they were speechless for a while. As the saying goes, rich people are willful. But to be willful to the extent of Jin Qinhuang, it was really rare. Jingwan faintly felt that something seemed to be out of control. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.